Hi, everyone. So this is the care teams update. We've recently conducted usability tests we recently spoke to 30 users in Uganda, consisting of BRAC CHPs and MOH VHTs. And we're still reviewing all the insights that we've collected over that week, and we'll be able to share our consolidated analysis in the near future on the forum. However, I wanted to give a quick update with the kind of work we did with them. So we conducted usability tests and focus group discussions to gauge the intuitiveness and learnability of potential UI UX updates to different aspects of the CHT, primarily around navigation. And you can see a couple of examples on the slide here with some screenshots. So just some subtle changes to the header, to the action button, testing out what a slide out navigation might look like and how it's received. And generally the updates were well received and often found easier to use by those users with higher tech literacy. Others sometimes struggled with the new concepts, but were often able to learn the introduced patterns within the first couple of interactions with the prototypes. So high hopes there. We also facilitated 15 generative interviews where we uncovered insights and behaviors that we probably wouldn't have been able to without actually watching users interact with the CHT. Some of those included accidentally closing the app several times and having to reopen it due to the back button behavior, the keyboard taking up 2/3 of the phone on smaller screens, and in some cases also hiding the field that users are trying to type into, and users having to tap on components or buttons multiple times before the intended action is performed, indicating probably our tap zones are too small. But yeah, that's a quick overview of what we tested, what we talked about, what kind of stuff we observed. Like I said, full reports will be found on the forum in the near future, and we're looking forward to using those learnings to continuously improve the experience and working together with other partners to continue to get meaningful feedback from our end users. So if something like this exercise is something you're interested in, definitely please reach out to us either directly or again on the forum. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, next slide, please, for allies. Great, thanks. Hi, I'm Ashley Jones, a technical product owner here in the United States. And much like Nicole is working with the care teams, we are also finally starting generative interviews. And the generative interviews, as Nicole was just talking about with the CHWs in the field, really give the product team good insight into how the product's actually used. The questions are asked about prior actions that you've done, so that we were able to capture things that actually happened as opposed to speculation about what might happen or what you might like to do. They're really exciting to get insights into the frustrations, like the tap zones that Nicole mentioned for the CHWs. But on the ally side, we're focused on the back end, right? On the app development. Solomon, I was excited to hear about the GPS data collection. That's something we're very interested in hearing about the struggles that people have. So that might manifest as we tried to build a dashboard and we couldn't find the documentation for doing that. So if you find yourself interested in any of the things that I'm saying or into any of these 4 categories that are listed on the screen here, I would love to hear from you, and we can schedule an interview to help gather the information which is captured in your brains. A big part of this, as I said, is getting it out from the community back to the product so we can start to see how we can help improve the product in tangible ways that directly benefit our constituents.
Yeah, so we had an experience where we had a setup, and as the number of documents increased, the devices became extremely slow. And we were thinking of the purging rule, but because the project was almost coming to an end, we never implemented it. So I just wanted to find out whether you had challenges as the number of records were increasing with the slowness.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge we found overall, not something that came up specifically on our field visit, but there were definitely issues with storage in general and also things like battery life and connectivity, things outside the CHT that we definitely took note of and will need to consider as like a whole picture opportunity. But yeah, nothing more specific than that.
Actually, not actually, Philip, a follow-up question to that. Were you able to implement the purging rules?
I looked at online documentation on the purging rule, and there were a lot of warnings there on be careful before you do it. And because the project was almost coming to an end, I never implemented. But it's something I want to do now as we prepare for the next phase of the project so that I have enough time to test. I never found anyone who implemented. That's what I wanted to find out from them, whether they had a chance of implementing the purging rule and experience.
We definitely have a number of partners that do use that functionality. So this is probably a good topic to bring to the forum, because I think there are probably others out there in your situation, Philip, and that's a good opportunity for us to get a mix of people describing their experience where they were able to use it successfully.
Okay, so I'll start over. We have been building a new product called CHT Sync, which will replace CouchToPG. This is a pipeline which will bring data from CouchDB, normalize it, and put it into a Postgres database. And the ultimate goal is to make it easier for customers and users to look at different dashboards for their data. And we're trying to support this. The pipeline had a couple different goals. One was to improve the stability and our ability to update and make modifications to it. So we've chosen to use different open source technologies. You can see there Logstash and Postgres. And so Logstash pulls data from CouchDB, passes it to Postgres, and then that puts it into the database. And so we chose to do this because then these are two very stable, commonly used open source technologies, and that allows a very stable pipeline. And then making it easier for users to develop their dashboards, we've chosen to use dbt, which is a somewhat new but widely popular data manipulation tool. And using this, we've created a set of standard dashboards that we'll be releasing, and these will come kind of automatically configured into Superset. So when a new customer chooses to use these tools, they'll automatically have a full pipeline, and it will automatically come with some dashboard examples. And then it'll be fairly simple for them to make modifications depending on the type of data that they're using. And so, yeah, this should, the first release, we hope to have that out soon. We'll release more information as that comes out.
Ashley?
Great, thanks. So 3.15 came out on the 4th of May, and I wanted to cover briefly some of the highlighted features, and as well later there's a link to follow up to see everything that's listed there. We had a partner, and I'm forgetting, that was in Uganda, where CHWs were trying to connect, and if the internet was especially spotty in coverage, the app would really slow down waiting for connection if it could get a little sniff of the signal. So there's a new feature where if we don't have sufficient speed, then we just cut it off so that the app can launch offline. And so what that means is when there is connectivity, you can continue using the app, but it won't block you from using it. Especially for this crew on this call, I was reviewing the notes, and there's a neat version where we record the forms version. So when you think about developing an app, you're often iterating and changing the configuration. And it's hard to know when a document's captured and the record's created, and then you're looking at it later in CouchDB, which version of the form that it was created from. And so now we're capturing that as of 3.15. So this is going to help debug, for example, which field names were there, what the schema structure is in the NoSQL database. And then finally, I wanted to call out that we support Bikram Sambat dates. And this is specifically around the workflow of working the way CHWs work in the field. Instead of remembering how many weeks ago and trying to calculate that, they would just enter in the date one piece of data at a time, including the ability to enter maybe just the month and the year if you don't know the exact day. So by simplifying the workflow and offering it native in the Nepali date system, this allows for more accurate data and to work more the way the CHW works. 315 is good, and it paves the way to 4.0, which we'll also talk about on this call. The big marquee feature of 4.0 is the ability to scale. This means that our partners with larger deployments that have thousands of CHWs that often might be, for example, synchronizing at the end of the month to make sure all their data is captured, really is a big imposition on the server. And right now, the documentation suggests you give it more CPU and more RAM, so you're scaling that vertically, but there's not the ability to give, say, more nodes to couch, known as scaling horizontally out. And with 4.0, we formally introduced that feature, which allows you to really empower the server to move a lot more quickly to handle the additional load. Another key feature that we tried to make as a non-breaking change but had to go into CHT 4.0 is we're upgrading Enketo Core to be on the 5x branch. This will allow the CHT to be compliant with the ODK forms that Enketo uses and allows us to use more features and more of the widgets that Enketo offers, and also paves the way for a CHT, I believe 4.1. We're looking at upgrading to the latest Enketo 6x branch, which will allow us to be totally up to date, barring any last minute changes from Enketo's side. In our testing, we found that anyone who's on the 3x branch can upgrade directly to 4.0, and that means that all the forms should work. We recommend the regular level of testing in terms of setting up a test instance and making sure that everything works as expected. But we're really hoping to make this as easy as possible. Originally, this was going to be you shouldn't even notice the front end until the Enketo changes came, but there will be some changes there. We'll be sure to document all changes. We'll be sure to ensure that the process of going from the 3x architecture, which has a single Docker container or two, to multiple Docker containers, making sure that process is smooth and well documented. And while we're still not quite final what's going to be in 4.0, we do track it, of course, publicly on GitHub, and you're welcome to take a look and ask any questions about anything that there's concerns about. And speaking about things that people might have concerns about, I think Craig is going to talk about Android 1.0 next, which there is required for 4.0.
Thanks, Ashley. I'm Craig. I'm our Director of Product Development at Medic. So this is going to talk a little bit about CHT Android. So that's the Android wrapper that is on the device that hosts our application. And there is one major change worth talking about through there. And through that, I'll talk through a little bit of where the differences are for different people with different profiles on the phones. So the first item you see there, it says much newer Chrome version. So the way our Android application works is we have this crosswalk library that packages what is now a very old version of Google Chrome. And with Android or CHT Android 1.0, we're dropping that and having everyone switch over to the Chrome that's on your device. And in those cases, that it will be a much newer version of Chrome. And depending on how you have that set up, that Chrome version will be what's called evergreen. So it'll keep upgrading automatically. And the advantages there are almost every single time a new Chrome version is released, there are performance and security fixes that come along with it. And as a result, your device will gain those. But with the older versions, we were fixed at was Chrome version 53. So anytime updates happened, no one actually got them. Everyone kept using the old one. So we've been using this already for some time. So if you have an Android 10 device today and you're using a newer version of CHT Android, you're already on that experience. So the big change here is for users that have Android 9 or older devices. And now those ones with this new CHT Android will switch over to using that Chrome version that's on your phone natively. So those are the people that will experience those performance and security enhancements that I mentioned. Something worth calling out here is, like Ashley had mentioned, CHT 1.0 is meant to go with CHT 4.0, but we also know that it's a big challenge to get Android releases distributed, like either just logistically or getting people understanding what's going on and finding out a way to get APK files into the Play Store or manually with different mechanisms for whatever works for your program. So the part that we really want to stress here is please come and talk to us. We want to know how you get things rolled out, and we want to make sure that we have a plan that works for you. So what's happening here is to say, if you upgrade to CHT 4.0, we're saying you need to be on Android 1.0. That said, there are no known breakages for older Android apps, so we want those to continue working. But for supported compatibility with CHT 4.0, then we want you to be on 1.0. And again, the part to stress here is come talk to us so we can make sure we have a way to support you at timelines that work for you for doing those upgrades, because we know that takes time. We know it needs to get into project plans. We know the ways of doing it aren't always simple, and they're definitely not always the same from one program to another. So please come talk to us. We want to make sure this works for everyone and that everyone can roll this out on timelines that work for you.
Maybe a general question, Anthony, during our experience when we are using the couch to PG to pull the data, remember when we could not find all the data, we wanted to now to access it from the backend. One of the things we noted is versions, the versions of the different softwares. And like Node, I remember how I had Node version 12, I would grade to 10 before it could work. So if updates can be done so that it's clear which versions of software goes with the platform, it makes it easier, because you end up spending a lot of time before you get the version that works.
Philip, for Node versions, is that for where you're running the CHT, or is that for like on your local computer for some of the tooling like CHT Conf or something, or maybe everything? Where is it that you're seeing the issues around what version of Node's running?
Especially when we were pulling the data using the couch to PG API.
Okay, and I think Aiden, you might be able to speak to that a little bit with how that'll work with CHT sync and how that'll be Dockerized. Can you speak to that a little bit, Aiden?
Yeah, so the CHT sync will be deployed in either Docker Compose or with Kubernetes. And there'll be, so there's kind of two separate products. So there's CHT sync, which is a replacement for couch to PG, and that will be released as basically a Docker Compose file. And so you can put that with the other things, and you configure it with some environment variables to configure where it points to. And then it runs slightly different from couch to PG. Couch to PG was running large batches at some kind of interval. This will run continuously. And so as data flows into CouchDB, it'll be pulled all the way through into Postgres in quote unquote real time with whatever delays occur just due to network. And yeah, so those are kind of the main differences. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. I'll be looking forward to testing.
And just for anyone that's not familiar with some of the Docker details, something worth noting there is Docker kind of, in this case, it helps us abstract away some of those node versions. So you're just using whatever's in the container, and you don't actually have to care about those details on your machine. You can just trust that that container image is going to work no matter what.
Generally, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, generally, as we sort of emerge from this huge upgrade that we're working on, if you look at CHT sync pipeline and CHT4, all of those will be in their own discrete Docker containers. And as Craig was saying, each of them will run the correct version that you need to run. So then you need to figure out the correct Docker version to support it. And then I think the only area that will really be painful for Node will be CHT-conf for when you're doing command line configurations, because the Docker system totally abstracts what version of Node, what version of Postgres, all these systems that were before painful to upgrade should now be relatively easy, because there's a formal bifurcation of the server software and the data so that you can update the containers relatively trivially.
All right. Thanks, Craig, Aidan, and Ashley. Philip, since you have shared a lot of challenges about your projects, I would like to give you an opportunity just to share a high-level overview about the project you are talking about and maybe what you are able to achieve.
Thank you, Anthony. So we are collecting data about COVID and TB. So we configured the backend. We had mobile devices, tablets, which were used for the actual data collection. And our target was about 5,200 data points or participants. And as I said, as the data, as we were moving towards 5,000, the devices became extremely slow. Remember, we are running in 4 counties, which are physically far off, and all the calls were coming to me. So it was not a very interesting thing. But the beauty is that we managed. They were slow, but they were still working. And finally, the data came in. We were able to configure the dashboard. And as the data were coming in, you could be able to see it from targets. And that was easy because it allowed all our project partners to see where we were at any particular time. So we configured the backend, the front end, the data came in. The only challenges, as I said, on one of the RRTs, there was a challenge with the hierarchy. I could see the data from the admin panel, but when we pulled the data, that was not visible. Even after using the API to pull the backend data, we lost that data. And then we got into a challenge. Anthony, you know, when you're trying to recover the data, the device became slow. We had installed and poof, everything went. So we lost about 200 records, but most of the data was in. So the experience was good because the project ended successfully. We had data through the dashboard. Our partners could be able to follow the data collection from the different counties. And I think that was good. There is still need for using of the tool because it was like a test phase. It worked very well. So we shall use it for the next phases of the project. So once I get the details, I'll share.
All right, thanks.